I was sitting in my recliner with the TV on and a plate of reheated pork chop going cold on the coffee table when my phone rang at 6:48 in the evening. I almost didn't pick up. It had been that kind of Friday. My name is Howard Bellamy. I'm 62 years old, retired, and I live alone in the same house I've owned for 31 years. I ran a small electrical supply business for most of my adult life, built it from nothing, sold it when my knees started giving me trouble, and my accountant told me the timing was right. I'm not rich, but I'm comfortable. I paid my debts, put money away, and tried to do right by the people I loved. That Friday, my son Nolan had called me around noon to cancel dinner. His voice was flat, distracted, the kind of tone people use when they've already decided something and just need you to go along with it. Something came up at the office. They were keeping him late. Rain check, Dad? I told him it was fine. I meant it. Nolan worked hard, and I wasn't going to give him a hard time over a missed dinner, so I changed out of my good shirt, settled in, and made peace with a quiet evening alone. Then Stuart Colby called. Stuart managed Carver's Grill, the restaurant on Delwood Avenue where Beverly and I used to eat every Friday night without fail. That tradition started maybe 2 years into our marriage and ran for over 3 decades, right up until Beverly got sick. After she passed, I kept going back. Not because I enjoy eating alone, but because sitting at that table by the side window still feels close to something I don't want to let go of. Stuart always made sure that table was available for me, never made a fuss about it, just took care of it quietly, the way good people do. "Mr. Bellamy," he said, keeping his voice low like he was stepping away from the dining room floor. "I hope I'm not overstepping here, but someone is currently running a tab on your account tonight, and I wanted to make sure you were aware before it went any further." I sat up straight in the recliner. "How many people?" I asked. "A party of 4, sir. They've been seated about 45 minutes. They ordered champagne when they came in." The seafood tower just went out. I thanked him, told him I'd be there in 20 minutes. Then I set the phone down on the arm of the chair and sat very still for a moment. Nolan had told me he was working late. I put on my good shirt after all, grabbed my coat off the hook by the door, and drove to Carver's without calling anyone. I parked around the side of the building to keep my car out of the front window line of sight, then walked in through the main entrance. My coat was still damp from the light drizzle outside. The hostess started to greet me, and I gave her a small wave and kept moving. Stuart was near the bar. He caught my eye and gave the smallest nod toward the far side of the dining room. I didn't need much more direction than that. I saw them right away. Nolan was sitting at the corner table by the window, my table, the one I had eaten at more Friday nights than I could count. He was leaning back in his chair with his arms spread easy and relaxed, the way a man sits when he feels like he owns the room. Next to him was Diane, my daughter-in-law, turned toward the other side of the table with her best smile going. Across from them sat Perry and Sylvia Vance, Diane's parents, my sons-in-laws. Perry was laughing at something with a wine glass in his hand. Sylvia was nodding along, her earrings catching the candlelight. The table was loaded, champagne buckets sweating in its stand. A 2-tier seafood tower already half worked through. Bread, appetizers, water glasses full, the whole spread, and my card was paying for every bit of it. I didn't walk over. I stepped sideways toward the hostess stand and put myself behind one of the large potted olive trees they keep near the entrance. I needed a minute before I did anything. What I was looking at didn't hit me all at once. It came in pieces the way a bad situation usually does when you're not ready for it. First piece, Nolan said he was working late. He was not at work. Second piece, Diane was wearing a handbag I had never seen before. Dark leather, structured, the kind of bag that does not come off a department store clearance rack. Third piece, Stuart had said your account, not a card someone handed us tonight. That meant this was not a one-time mistake. That meant they had done this before, and the staff knew it well enough to consider it routine. I stood behind that olive tree and looked at my son laughing with his in-laws over champagne and seafood at my usual table on my usual night, and I felt something go very quiet inside me. I waved Stuart over and asked him how often they had been coming in. He hesitated. I could see him choosing his words carefully. "A few times over the past couple of months, Mr. Bellamy, always a full dinner. Champagne more often than not. Sometimes they take the private corner," he paused, then added, "We always put it on your tab." They never asked us to do otherwise. I asked him if he could print me the charges from the last 2 months. He looked uncomfortable for a moment. Then he nodded and slipped away toward the back office. While he was gone, I stood there and watched my son's table. Diane was doing most of the talking. Nolan was relaxed. Perry was engaged. Sylvia kept touching Diane's arm the way mothers-in-law do when they're proud of the daughter their son married. The whole table looked like a magazine ad for people who had figured out how to live well. I pulled out my phone, I dialed Nolan's number, and I watched him feel the buzz in his pocket. I watched him glance down at the screen. I watched him read my name on the caller ID. Then I watched him turn the phone face down on the table and keep right on talking to Perry Vance like nothing had happened. That moment told me more than any receipt ever could. A man who accidentally forgot to cancel plans, or who was embarrassed about being caught, picks up the phone. He might not know what to say, but he picks up. Nolan saw my name, made a decision, and put the phone down. That was not embarrassment. That was a choice. I slipped the phone back into my coat pocket and stayed where I was. Stuart came back a few minutes later. He had a plain white envelope in his hand, and he slid it to me at the edge of the hostess stand like he was passing me something he did not want anyone to see. "I printed what I could," he said quietly. "I'm not supposed to hand this out, Mr. Bellamy, but I've known you a long time." I thanked him and told him he would not have any trouble from me over it. I moved to a stool at the far end of the bar, angled so I could still see their table clearly. I opened the envelope and started reading. October 3rd, $462. Seafood platter, champagne, desserts. October 11th, $318. Dinner for 4, 2 bottles of wine. October 15th, $385. Barolo, short rib, lobster ravioli. October 21st, $271. Weeknight dinner, cocktails, appetizers. October 27th, $512, caviar service, multiple cocktails, tiramisu. November 2nd, $347 dinner for 4 champagne cheese plate. November 4th, $298 Saturday brunch, mimosas full table. November 9th, $207 weeknight, wine by the bottle, 2 entrees, 8 dinners. $3,800 in charges at Carver's alone. And from the way Stuart had said what I could, I understood this was only one restaurant. I sat at that bar and read through the list twice. Each date on that paper matched something I could remember from the past 2 months. October 11th was the night Nolan called and said Diane had a migraine and they needed a quiet night in. October 21st was a Tuesday, and Diane had texted me that week to say their grocery budget was shot after an unexpected car repair. November 2nd was the weekend Nolan told me they could not make the drive out because gas prices were killing them. Every excuse had a receipt behind it. I thought about the day I handed Diane that card. It was about 14 months ago. Nolan called me on a Wednesday afternoon, his voice tired in a way that worried me. He said Diane had just come home from the hospital with the baby and they were stretched thinner than he'd expected. Unpaid maternity leave, new expenses coming in from every direction, his paycheck not quite covering the gap. I drove over that same afternoon. Diane was sitting at the kitchen table with the baby on her shoulder, and she looked exhausted in the real way, not the performed way. I took the card out of my wallet and set it on the table in front of her. "For the baby," I said. "Formula, diapers, whatever he needs, don't stress about it." She had looked up at me with tired eyes and said she didn't know how to thank me. Sitting at that bar reading through $2,800 worth of champagne and seafood towers, I thought about those tired eyes and tried to figure out when exactly they had stopped being real. I folded the envelope and put it in my coat pocket. Then I opened my banking app and navigated to the card settings. The card I had given Diane was a secondary card tied to an emergency account I kept separate from my main finances. Beverly had suggested setting it up years ago, a separate line just for family situations that come up. I had always liked the idea. It felt like a responsible way to help without overextending. I set a freeze on the card scheduled for exactly 8:45 that evening. I checked the time. It was 8:26, 19 minutes. I ordered a plain coffee from the bartender and wrapped both hands around the mug. I was not in a hurry. Rushing this would hand Diane an excuse. If I walked over there right now, while the card was still active, she could hand it to the waiter and it would clear, and the whole evening would become a misunderstanding she could smooth over later. I needed the timeline to work exactly right. Card frozen, check presented, decline confirmed. That sequence had to happen in order before I moved anywhere near that table. So I sat and I watched. Diane was telling some kind of story that had Sylvia laughing hard enough to put her hand over her mouth. Perry was leaning in, enjoying it. Nolan was smiling, relaxed, completely at ease. He did not look like a man waiting for his father to walk through the door. He looked like a man who was used to this, who had decided the risk was acceptable, who had run the odds and figured I would never find out. I thought about Beverly again. She had always read people faster than I did. She would have known something was off with Diane inside the first month. She had a way of watching people that was not suspicious exactly, just clear-eyed, the way practical people are when they've seen enough of life to stop giving benefit of the doubt without reason. I had always leaned on that instinct of hers without realizing how much. Without her beside me, I had filled in the gaps with trust instead. That had turned out to be expensive at $80.38. Gene, the waiter who usually covered my section, passed by with a tray. I stopped him quietly. "When do they usually call for the check?" He glanced toward the table. After dessert, Mr. Bellamy, looks like they're just finishing up. I nodded. He moved on. At 80:43, I stood up from my stool, picked up my coffee, and moved to an open two-top table directly in Nolan's line of sight. Not close, not confrontational, just visible. I sat down, set my mug on the table, and waited. At 8:45, my phone buzzed once. Transaction attempt, $631 declined. 8 seconds later, it buzzed again. Transaction attempt, $84 declined. I took a slow sip of coffee and watched their table. The waiter handling their table was a young guy I didn't recognize, probably newer. I watched him pick up the black check presenter from their table with that easy professional smile they train you to wear. He carried it toward the register without any idea what was about to happen. Diane was still talking. Her hands moved the way they do when she's performing for an audience. Wide gestures, pauses in the right places, the full show. Perry was leaning forward on his elbows. Nolan topped off Sylvia's water glass without being asked, the kind of small gesture that makes in-laws think their son-in-law was raised right. I sat 2 tables away and watched all of it. The waiter returned to their table, maybe 90 seconds later. I could not hear what he said from where I was sitting, but I have been in enough awkward situations to read the body language. He leaned in slightly, kept his voice low, tilted his head just a degree in that apologetic way. That means the news is not good. Diane's smile did not fall right away. It flickered first, the way a light does before it goes out. She said something to the waiter. He nodded and stepped back, and I watched her pull my card from her wallet and hand it over a second time. He came back again, same result. This time her smile was gone completely. She turned to Nolan and said something fast and low, her chin tucked, her eyes moving. Nolan frowned and reached for his own wallet. He checked it, scrolled something on his phone, and I could see from the way his jaw tightened that whatever he found there was not helpful. Perry and Sylvia had gone still across the table, the polite frozen stillness of people who realize they are sitting inside someone else's problem and are not sure which direction to look. That was my cue. I stood up, buttoned the top button of my coat, and picked up the envelope. I did not rush. I walked over at the same pace I would use crossing a parking lot in the rain, steady, no drama. The closer I got, the more clearly I could see Diane's face cycling through its options. She spotted me when I was still about 4 tables away. I watched her recognize me, and I watched her make the split-second decision to try to recover. She started to arrange a smile. I did not give her time to get it all the way up. Howard Perry rose halfway out of his chair, reaching to shake my hand out of pure reflex, the way men his age do when someone walks up. "We didn't realize you were here tonight." "I wasn't planning to be," I said. I shook his hand because Perry Vance had not done anything wrong. Then I pulled out the chair at the end of the table and sat down without being invited. Nolan looked at me. His face had gone the color of old concrete. I set the envelope on the table between the water glasses and the nearly empty champagne bucket. I did not open it. I did not need to wave it around. I just let it sit there where everyone at the table could see it. "That envelope contains printed records of every charge made to my emergency card at this restaurant over the past 2 months, I said. My voice was level. I was not performing for anyone. 8 dinners, just over $2,800 at this one location. Champagne, seafood towers, wine by the bottle, Saturday brunch. I paused for 1 second. Not a single grocery run. Not a single baby supply. That is what the card I gave you for emergencies was used for." Diane opened her mouth. I held up one hand, palm out. "Nolan," I said, turning to look at my son directly. "I called you tonight. You saw my name on the screen and you put the phone face down on the table." I let that sit in the air between us for a moment. So I'm not going to treat this like a misunderstanding, because it is not one. The table was completely quiet. Even the background noise of the restaurant seemed to pull back. The couple at the next table had stopped talking. The waiter was still standing nearby, check presenter in hand, unsure whether to approach or disappear. Nolan said nothing. He looked down at his water glass. Diane tried again. "Howard, if you would just let me explain the situation. We were going through a really difficult period and we fully intended to pay you back every cent. This was never meant to be a permanent thing. It was just supposed to be temporary while we got back on our feet. And I know how this looks, but if you just give me a chance to walk you through what happened these past few months, I think you would understand." She said all of that in about one breath, without a pause, the way people talk when they are hoping speed will substitute for logic. I let her finish. I'm sure it felt temporary every single time. I said October 3rd felt temporary. October 27th felt temporary. November 4th felt temporary. All 8 of them probably felt like the last one. I tapped the envelope once with 2 fingers. The card is already frozen. Has been since 8:45. Whatever comes next for the 2 of you, we can talk about that later. But tonight, this table covers its own check. 4 people ate here. 4 people pay. Perry cleared his throat. He did not look at Diane, he reached for his wallet. Of course, he said. His voice was quiet and even and carried a weight in it that told me he was going to have his own conversation with his daughter before the night was over. Sylvia opened her purse without a word. Nolan pulled out his card slowly like a man moving through water. Diane sat completely still, both hands flat on the tablecloth, staring at the envelope. The waiter split the check 4 ways. Nobody spoke while the cards were run. I sat at the end of the table and did not fill the silence with anything, because there was nothing left to say that the receipts had not already said better. When the last receipt was signed, I stood up, nodded once to Perry and Sylvia, and walked out. I did not look back at Nolan. I did not look back at Diane. I pushed through the front door of Carver's and stepped into the night air and stood next to my car for a long moment without getting in. The drizzle had stopped. The parking lot was quiet. Through the front window of the restaurant, I could see the faint glow of their table, the shapes of people sitting in the aftermath of something they had not expected. I turned away from it and got in the car. The drive home took 11 minutes. I know because I watched the clock on the dashboard the whole way, not because I was tracking anything, but because my mind needed something simple and steady to hold on to. 11 minutes, 41 degrees outside. 4-way stop at Ridgeline and Cooper, where I always stopped even when there was nobody coming. I parked in the driveway, went inside, hung up my coat, and sat down at the kitchen table, same table I had sat at for 31 years. Beverly and I had picked it out together at an estate sale 2 weeks after we moved in. Solid oak, 4 chairs, a small burn mark on one corner from the time Nolan knocked over a candle at his 8th birthday dinner. I had always meant to sand that out and never did. I sat at that table and did not turn on the TV and did not make any food and just let the house be quiet around me. My phone started going at 9:02. Nolan first, then Diane twice, then Nolan again. I did not answer any of them. Not because I was punishing anyone. I just did not have anything useful to say yet, and I have learned over the years that talking before you're ready is how small problems turn into permanent ones. At 10:31, Perry Vance called. I picked up on the second ring. He did not waste time on pleasantries. He said he owed me an apology for sitting at that table and eating a dinner that had been charged to my account without my knowledge. I told him he did not owe me anything, that he had no way of knowing. He said that was generous of me, but that he still felt the weight of it. We understood each other. Then he said something that landed harder than I expected. He told me that on the drive back to their hotel, Diane had told him and Sylvia that Nolan had been out of work for 6 months. 6 months. I sat with that for a second. Perry said it quietly. The way you say something when you're not sure how much damage it's going to do. He and Sylvia had believed Nolan was doing well. Diane always had an explanation for the nice dinners. A work bonus, a good month, a corporate account. They had taken it at face value because they wanted to believe their daughter had landed on her feet. Perry said he was not going to make excuses for her, but he wanted me to understand the full picture before I made any decisions. I thanked him for telling me. We stayed on the phone for maybe 20 minutes, and when we hung up, I felt oddly, like I had made a friend in the middle of a mess. I went to bed at midnight. I slept better than I had in weeks. Nolan showed up at my door on Monday afternoon. 3 days later, he came alone. No Diane. He was wearing a jacket I had given him 2 Christmases back, the heavy canvas one he always said was his favorite. He looked like he had not been sleeping. I opened the door and let him in. I put coffee on. We sat at the kitchen table. He talked for a long time. He told me about losing his job in May, a round of cuts at his company, no warning and no severance worth mentioning. He had been applying since June without telling anyone, not me, not his in-laws. He was ashamed and convinced he would fix it before it became visible, and while he was waiting to fix it, Diane had started using my card to keep their life looking the way it had always looked. He said he had known she was using it. Not the full amounts, not the exact pattern, but he had known and he had not stopped it, because stopping it would have meant admitting everything. He looked at his hands while he said most of this. I waited until he was done. Then I asked him one question. Why didn't you just call me? He did not have a clean answer. He said he was embarrassed. Said he thought he could get ahead of it. I told him that was like leaving a broken pipe running because you were too proud to call a plumber. The leak doesn't care how you feel about it. He nodded. He did not argue. I refilled his coffee and then I told him what I needed before we could move forward. 3 things. First, Diane would sign a written repayment agreement for the full amount charged to my card, notarized with a timeline attached. Not because I was going to take them to court over it, but because a signed document turns a conversation into a commitment, and I needed to know this family took commitments seriously. Second, no more shared accounts, no emergency cards, no access to any of my finances in any form. If they needed help in the future, they would ask me directly, and we would talk about it like adults. No more silent arrangements. Third, complete honesty going forward. If Nolan lost another job, he would tell me. If they were struggling, they would say so. No more performances for anyone, including themselves. Nolan sat across from me at that oak table with the burn mark on the corner and looked at me for a long moment. Then he said he agreed to all three. No pushback, no negotiating, just yes. That meant more to me than the apology did. Diana signed the repayment agreement the following week. She came with Nolan, sat at that same kitchen table, read through the document my lawyer had drafted, and signed it without making a scene. She did not apologize in so many words, but she showed up and she signed it. And sometimes that is the most honest thing a person can do. The notarized copy went into the filing cabinet in my office, right next to the deed to the house and Beverly's life insurance paperwork. I hoped I would never need to pull it out again, but it was there. The months that followed were different, not easy but different in ways that mattered. Nolan found work in January, a smaller company, less money than before, but steady. He told me about it the same week he got the offer, called me on a Tuesday evening just to talk it through. That phone call meant more to me than he probably realized. It was the first time in a long while that he had brought me into something real instead of just showing me the polished surface of his life. Diane was quieter around me, not cold, just careful in a way that felt honest. She was working extra hours to cover her share of the repayment schedule. Perry told me she had sold some things, the handbag, a few pieces of jewelry. I did not ask for details. That was between her and her conscience. Perry and I started having coffee once a month at a diner near his hotel when he and Sylvia came through town. It became a regular thing without either of us formally suggesting it. We were two men in our 60s who had both been surprised by the same situation, and there was something straightforward and comfortable about talking to someone who had no reason to spin the story in any direction. He told me once, about 3 months in, that he had a hard conversation with Diane after that night at Carver's, one of the harder ones of his life. He did not tell me the details, and I did not ask. It was enough to know it had happened. Nolan started coming by on Sunday afternoons, not every week, but most of them. He would show up around 2, sometimes with Diane and the baby, sometimes just with the baby, and we would sit in the backyard if the weather allowed or at the kitchen table if it didn't. He started helping me with things around the house, small repairs I had been putting off, a gutter that needed clearing, a section of fence that had been leaning since last winter. He was not handy by nature, but he showed up and he tried, and we figured things out together the same way I had with my own father 35 years ago. One Sunday in March, he found an old toolbox in the garage that had belonged to my father. He opened it up and spent 20 minutes going through it like a kid at a museum, holding up each tool and asking what it was for. I told him. He listened. At one point, he picked up a pipe wrench and turned it over in his hands and said, quietly, that he wished he had learned more of this stuff when he was younger. I told him it was not too late. He put the wrench back in the box carefully, like it was worth something, and I think to him in that moment, it was. My grandson started walking in February. Nolan sent me a video the same afternoon it happened, a 12-second clip of the boy taking 4 unsteady steps across the living room floor before sitting down hard and looking surprised at himself. I watched it probably 15 times. I saved it to my phone. It is still there. I still eat at Carver's most Friday evenings. Stuart still has my table ready. Jean still keeps the coffee coming without being asked. The only thing that has changed is that occasionally Nolan and Diane join me, and when they do, we split the check without discussion. Nobody makes a point of it. It is just how things work now. That is what honest looks like when you build it from scratch. It is not dramatic. It does not have a lot of ceremony. It is just people deciding to stop pretending and start showing up as they actually are. I do not regret how that night at Carver's went. Not one part of it. I regret that it was necessary. But standing there with that envelope and a frozen card and my son looking at the tablecloth was the first honest moment we had shared in a long time, and I would not trade what came after it for anything. If you have ever been the one quietly holding everything up while the people you love pretend the ceiling stays up on its own, you know exactly what that night felt like. And if you have been sitting on something like that, waiting for the right moment to say enough, here's what I can tell you from the other side of it. There is no perfect moment. There's only the moment you decide you're done negotiating against yourself. Drop a comment and let me know what you would have done, and tell me what city you were watching from.